Hello and welcome to T2 Day 3 of Honors Precalculus. We're going to talk about trig equations today. So when it asks you to find an algebraic expression that is equivalent to each of the following, what we're really going to do is construct a triangle where all of these things work. So we work from the inside out. Cosine inverse of x squared. That means the cosine of what angle is x squared. Remember, cosine, is adjacent over hypotenuse. So what that means is the adjacent side will be x squared and the hypotenuse will be 1 if this is theta, and that's a right angle right there. So we need to find the length of this third side. Well, we know that if that third side, let's say, is h, we know that x squared squared plus h squared has to be the hypotenuse squared. So that's x to the fourth plus h squared is equal to 1. So h squared is equal to 1 minus x to the fourth. So h is equal to the square root of 1 minus x to the fourth. So h is equal to 1 minus x to the fourth. And now the question is asking us to find the sine of this same angle. The sine of this same angle. Remember, sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. So the opposite side is the square root of 1 minus x to the fourth. And the hypotenuse is 1. So the answer is just going to be the square root of 1 minus x to the fourth. Now, if we're talking about the tangent of sine inverse of 3x, again, we start on the inside. The sine of what angle is 3x? We have a triangle, and what we need to do is, if we're talking about sine, so is opposite over hypotenuse. So that means the opposite side will be 3x, and that'll be 1, because it's 3x over 1 is 3x. So now we need to find this base length right here. We'll call that, I don't know, b. Use anything we want, really. So that means that b squared plus 3x squared will equal 1 squared. So that means that b squared plus 9x squared is equal to 1. So 9x squared is equal to 1 minus b squared. Sorry, excuse me. We need to isolate b squared. So it's going to be b squared is equal to 1 minus 9x squared. So b is equal to the square root of 1 minus 9x squared. And we want the positive root, the principal root. So that's what b is. And tangent, TOA, is opposite over adjacent. So that opposite side from theta will be 3x, and the adjacent side is the one we just found, 1 minus 9x squared. And there is no simplification we can do to that. We stop right here. So if we're asked to evaluate each of the following, we need to see if we can get them exact, or if not, go to 3 decimal places. Well, the square root of 16 is this. What squared is 16? And the square root is already there, so we just take the positive one. So that's going to be 4. And then over here, the square root of 12, there is no integer when you square it that equals 12. So you need to use your calculator, and you only take the positive one because the square root is already written. And if you do this on your calculator, you can do 3.464. As a side note, I'd be really impressed if someone could show me how to do that by hand. There is a really cool way to do square roots by hand. So next, let's solve each of the following equations and round to 3 decimal places where appropriate. So what we do first is we isolate x squared by dividing by 2. And now we take the square root of both sides. And when we do that, you have to take the positive and negative square root. So when you add in a square root, we added in a square root right now. The answer is therefore going to be 5 or negative 5. Because negative 5 times negative 5 is 25, and so is 5 times 5. We do something similar over here. We just have to get rid of the 4 first. So we have 3 times x minus 2 squared is equal to 8. Now we divide by 3, we get x minus 2 squared is equal to 8/3. And now we take the square root of both sides, so you know that x minus 2 has to equal the square root of 8/3, or x minus 2 has to equal negative square root of 8/3. And there is no integer whose square is 8/3, so we end up with x is equal to 2 plus the square root of 8/3, or x is equal to 2 minus the square root of 8/3. So now, if you use your calculator, which you'll need to get those nice square roots, you end up with it equal to 3.633, or when you do the other one, 2 minus the square root of 8/3, you get 0.367. Make sure you do these carefully on your calculator, and you got to go to 3 decimal places, 3 decimal places. So these ask you to evaluate in radians. So this question is asking the sine of what is the square root of 3/2? The sine of what is the square root of 3/2? And whenever I think of this, I think of the unit circle, and we know that sine is the y coordinate. So root 3 over 2 is about this high. So we're really looking at this angle right there. And what angle is that going to be? What coordinate is that? Well, we know the coordinate, there's a nice coordinate 1/2 root 3 over 2, and that's when theta is equal to pi over 3. So the sine of pi over 3 is root 3 over 2, so you would say sine inverse of root 3 over 2 is pi over 3. Now in this one it's asking the tangent of what angle is -1. The tangent of what angle is -1. So when you're thinking about the unit circle, tangent, remember, is opposite over adjacent. So this is going to be when opposite and adjacent are opposite signs of one another. So if you look at these 4 points right here, we know that that one, if that one's 45 degrees or pi over 4, it's root 2 over 2 comma root 2 over 2. Those are the same, but they're not opposite signs. They're opposite signs here. So right there you have root 2 over 2 comma negative root 2 over 2. And if you put them over each other, you end up with -1. So in this case, this answer is going to be negative pi over 4. This one is negative pi over 4. You'll note there is another possible answer here, potentially. So this is positive and positive. What about this coordinate right there? That's going to be, that's when theta is equal to 3 pi over 4, which is 135 degrees. And that's negative root 2 over 2 comma root 2 over 2. That is another possible answer. So you actually have 2 possible answers for this one right here. So continuing on finding more of these, we're asking to find theta when sine of theta is equal to 1/2. So when is sine of theta equal to 1/2? So if we look at this and we know we have our unit circle here, when is sine, the height, equal to 1/2? That's at this triangle right here when it's root 3 over 2 comma 1/2. And that's going to be at when theta is equal to 30 degrees, which is pi over 6, but they want this in degrees, so we write 30 degrees. Now, how often is that going to repeat itself, though? Well, one way you can think of this as it's going to repeat it every 360 degrees. So you could say 30 degrees plus 360 degrees n, where n is any integer. But you'll notice that there's another place, another triangle that has a height right here of 1/2, and that's negative root 3 over 2 comma 1/2. That's going to be at 150 degrees. So you also have another answer at 150 degrees plus every rotation of 360 degrees. So this one's now asking the cosine of what angle is equal to negative root 2 over 2. Another way to say this is theta is equal to the cosine inverse of negative root 2 over 2. So when is the cosine of theta equal to negative root 2 over 2? So again, you can draw your unit circle if you don't remember this off the top of your head. This is the x-coordinates, So back here, it's going to be, when this purple here is negative root 2 over 2. Well, that's going to be when this coordinate right here is also negative root 2 over 2, and the height is root 2 over 2. And then this one is just a reflection right there. That is negative root 2 over 2, comma negative root 2 over 2. So they both have x-coordinates of negative root 2 over 2. So what are those angles right there? Well, that's going to be 135 degrees. And it's also, again, plus more 90 degrees more to go from there to there. So going from here to here is the next angle, which would be 225 degrees. So the two answers here are going to be 135 degrees plus 360 n, and the other answer is going to be 225 degrees plus 360 n. Another way you can see there's two answers of this is you could graph cosine and see where the output is equal to negative root 2 over 2. You can graph that on Desmos and plot intersections. So let's do the same thing, but we're answering these in radians. So this is asking when is theta equal to cosine inverse of root 3 over 2. So it's asking when is the cosine of an angle equal to root 3 over 2. So if you draw this angle, this is going to be the x-coordinate. So the x-coordinate will be root 3 over 2 here when it's root 3 over 2 comma 1/2. And that right there in radians is pi over 6, which is 30 degrees, but they want it in radians. So the answer in this case is going to be pi over 6 plus 2 pi n. But then where else is the x value equal to root 3 over 2? Well, it's also going to be at this reflected triangle right there. And that coordinate right there is going to be, again, root 3 over 2, root 3, I can almost write the 3, comma, negative 1/2. So it has the same x value right here, but this angle right here is negative pi over 6. So the other answer is going to be negative pi over 6 plus 2 pi n. Rotates every 2 pi n. Now what about tangent equaling negative square root of 3? So theta is going to be the tan inverse, the arctangent of negative root 3. So this is where you can draw your triangle, your unit circle again, if you don't remember this off the top of your head. But what angle has a tangent equaling negative root 3? So remember, tangent is equal to, if this helps you, tangent TOA is opposite over adjacent. So this is actually going to be right down here at this angle, which is going to be negative pi over 3, because at that angle measure, if you remember this, it's going to be, you're going to end up with 1/2 as your x coordinate and negative root 3 over 2 as your y coordinate. And remember, tangent is opposite over adjacent, so it's going to be negative root 3 over 2 over 1/2, which is negative root 3 over 2 times the reciprocal, which is 2 over 1, which is negative root 3. So if you remember your trig values and you remember this value, it's going to be the y coordinate. Another way to write this is the y coordinate over the x coordinate. So when is the y coordinate over the x coordinate equal to negative root 3? And that's at negative pi over 3. And tangent has a period of pi, not 2 pi. So this is going to be pi n. Sine and cosine have periods of 2 pi. So all we're doing now is upping the difficulty a little by making it so that we have to do a little bit more math beforehand before we isolate theta. So in this case right here, we need to first subtract 2. So we get 3 cosine theta is equal to negative 1. So cosine of theta is equal to negative 1/3. That is not a trig value that you know from the unit circle, so you need to use your calculator. So if you do this out, you end up with theta is equal to 1.911. And you can add, remember, 2 pi n because it's cosine, but there is another, remember there's another value there. And if you do this on your calculator, you can also find that negative 1.911 plus 2 pi n works. And that's because when you're doing cosine and you need a specific x value, that is the cosine of what is negative 1/3. Negative 1/3 is right about here. So there's going to be two potential values here. There's going to be this angle value, and there's also going to be the angle value all the way to here. So you have to do the positive version of it this way and the negative version that way. We'll definitely talk about more of that in class. Over here we do something similar. We isolate, so we add 4, so we get negative 2 sine of theta is equal to 5, and sine of theta is equal to, therefore, 5 over negative 2. So this means that theta is equal to sine inverse of negative 5 over 2. But here's the thing, sine, no matter what you do, sine is always between 1 and negative 1. Negative 5 over 2 is negative 2.5. That's outside the range. So this is impossible because the sine of something can't be less than negative 1, and this is less than negative 1. So this adds just a little bit more difficulty. So on this one, when we're isolating theta, you first subtract 5, so you get 4 cosine of 3 theta equals 1. We subtracted 5, so we get cosine of 3 theta is equal to 1/3. So what this means is that 3 theta is equal to the cosine inverse of 1/3. And we know that's cosine inverse, one, not 1/3, it's 1/4. That is not a trig value that's nicely on the unit circle. So when you do this out, you get 3 theta is therefore equal to either 1.318 plus 2 pi n, and you get this value on your calculator. But you also need to remember that when you do this for cosine, you have to do two cases. It's going to be negative 1.318 plus 2 pi n. And then you divide by 3 to get your final answer. Then you divide out the 3 on both of these. So the final answer here is therefore going to be theta is equal to 0.439 plus 2 pi over 3n. Or theta is equal to negative 0.439 plus 2 pi over 3n. The key is that you have to add in the 2 pi n after you do the cosine inverse, and then you divide by 3. So over here we do something very similar. We add 2 to begin. We get pi over 4 theta equals 4, and then we get sine of pi over 4 theta is equal to negative 4/5. And now you'd use your calculator for this. So you know that's therefore after you do sine inverse, pi over 4 theta is equal to sine inverse of negative 4/5. You can use your calculator for this. So you get the two cases. Pi over 4 theta is either equal to negative 0.927 plus 2 pi n, or you get pi over 4 theta is equal to, comes out to be 4.069 plus 2 pi n. And this is because on the unit circle, when you're looking for a sine of value, that's negative 4/5, negative 4/5 is right here, negative 4/5 is right there. So what that means is you're either here or there. So when you do this on your calculator, you're going to get the negative 0.927, or you go all the way down around from here to there. So it's going to be pi plus, this right here is pi plus 0.927, 0.927. So this right here is the negative 0.927, and then to get the other value, you have to go all the way around like this, which is pi plus 0.927. And then you just multiply everything by 4 over pi, so you end up with theta is equal to negative 1.181 plus 8n, or theta is equal to 5.181 plus 8n. Takes your calculator and some careful manipulation and a lot of practice.